You are listening to the IoT For All Media Network.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the IoT For All Podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Chacon, and on today's episode, we have Jonas Schmid, the Co-CEO and VP of Business at Akenza AG. They are a company focused on low-code IoT application enablement platform, and we have a very interesting conversation. We talk a lot about what low-code IoT means, kind of the value it provides to solution development, how it works from a complexity standpoint, what the current landscape looks like in this low-code, no-code kind of conversation that we're seeing rise up in the IoT space, as well as answering the question, can self-service IoT really be a thing? So a lot of great points, a lot of great pieces of this conversation that I really value and think you'll find a lot of value in as well. But before we get into that, if any of you out there are looking to enter the fast-growing and profitable IoT market, but don't know where to start, check out our sponsor, Leverage. Leverage's IoT solutions development platform provides everything you need to create turnkey IoT products that you can white label and resell under your own brand. To learn more, go to iotchangeseverything.com. That's iotchangeseverything.com. And without further ado, please enjoy this episode of the IoT For All podcast. Welcome, Jonas, to the IoT For All show. Thanks for being here this week.
Thanks for having me. Very great to be here.
Yeah, I'm super excited. There's a lot of interesting things you have going on that I wanted to really dive into, and I think our audience is going to get a ton of value out of. But let's start off by having you give a quick introduction about yourself to our audience so they can learn a little bit more about who they're listening to.
So I'm Jonas Schmid. I'm co-CEO of Akenza. We founded this company in June 2017, so it's about 4.5 years old, 30 people based in Switzerland, and we have a really great IoT platform that I want to talk to you about today.
Totally unrelated to the company itself, but when you have like a co-CEO kind of arrangement, how does that work? Just out of curiosity.
So I'm more the business guy, less the techie guy.
Gotcha.
My techie guy.
Okay.
That's also why he's not here. He should be here and talk with you actually today. But you know, he's concentrating on the product, and I concentrate on talking to people. That works pretty well like that.
Fantastic. Well, we'll keep it relatively high level, anyways. So I think you'll be the perfect person for this conversation. Why don't you go ahead and introduce? Go ahead.
Just because you asked that question, you know, this is how we handle that, you know, with co-CEOs, with like kind of focusing on technology and focusing on business on both sides.
Totally makes sense. Actually. That's fantastic. So talk a little bit more about the company. What do you all do? What's the focus? Kind of what role do you play in IoT, just to kind of catch our audience up?
So we think, or we thought before we founded this company, that it is kind of difficult to connect devices to the cloud. So you have a high level of complexity, and it's very difficult for you to use all those different connectivity technologies. When we came up, there was LoRa was like the thing that was just coming up here in Switzerland, for example, LoRaWAN. The national telco carrier here, Swisscom, they rolled out the national network, and nobody knew how to use that national network of LoRaWAN. So there's connectivity technologies that are difficult from an operating perspective or from a technological perspective. There is a very heterogeneous market of different devices that are out there that you want to connect, or every solution needs its own connectivity, its own device, its own thing. And that's just difficult to do. So, you know, when you start up with your IT project, you have your great idea and you want to run out and create your case. You don't want to start developing for the next 6 months, right? Imagine you have your hardware and you want to connect it. That needs to be done in 30 minutes, not in like 3 months or 6 months or whatever. So this is where we come from, and where we have decided that we need to build an IoT platform that helps people to solve that problem, especially those who are not IT developers and know how to set up all those kind of services.
Yeah, the complexity around IoT is something that a lot of adopters kind of shy away from. They put a lot of the reliance on the companies they work with, like yours, for instance, to help them bring something to market. But at the same time, they want control. They want to be able to interact with the technology and do parts of it themselves, or potentially do parts of themselves down the line. So helping lower that complexity, I think, is one of the biggest contributors that a company can make to helping drive adoption in the space. So that's fantastic. You kind of are focused on that. And what I wanted to kind of expand on from there is, who is kind of the intended end user of your platform? Are you all building tools for people for a company to go in and utilize themselves? Are you handling kind of building the solution end to end? How does it kind of fit with your all focus?
So I would say our user group certainly has a technical background, not
Okay.
necessarily an IT background,
Okay.
or an operations background. So they're usually people out of an R&D team, for example, engineers, maybe even out of the hardware sector, people out of a digitalization project or out of
Sure.
innovation projects. All those kind of people, who might have a use case or a part of their IoT architecture stack basically ready, and also the knowledge in that, but they need basically the quick fix or that solution, how they
Hmm.
can create a solution out of that. I would say that's probably our target group, or people who can work with our product and they can do it completely in self-service. So they can just log in online and they can start setting up the case. And even people with me, I have an engineering background, but an IT background.
Sure.
People like me can set up a case in like 20 minutes and have a very steep learning curve in how to handle those things, and for example send a message into Slack. So I've just done that before Christmas to connect the device that you can push a button and it
Right.
sends a message to Slack. All those kind of things that give you a very quick achievement of goals.
Fantastic. And one of the hottest kind of topics that I've had guests mention throughout my previous conversations is around like low code and no code IoT. From your perspective, when it comes to lowering these barriers of complexity to help increase IoT adoption, what types of use cases or industries have kind of been leading the way from the companies maybe that you work with adopting these types of platforms?
So what we strongly see at the moment, or a very strong market that we see at the moment, this is the whole smart building market.
Okay.
So one of our close relatives is, for example, ISS Facility Management, which is a very big facility management provider that provides those digital services to their clients.
Okay.
And they are exactly those kind of people that I described before. They might have an idea, they have a very good understanding of their own vertical. They might even have a device lying around somewhere, and they can create a valuable use cases for their end clients, basically, with setting up something like that. So their more or less technical operators can also run that thing afterwards. That's maybe the whole other perspective that you also have to have on those
Hmm.
IoT platforms or in those cases is, if you have a lot of devices out there on the market, you might have even less technical people who actually have to maintain that stuff. So someone has to know about battery levels or whatever's out there, and fix that case over thousands of devices that you have out there.
Yeah, definitely for sure. And when you all are working with companies externally, you mentioned that they're more technical individuals, but is there a certain role or certain kind of level within the company that your tools are kind of more aimed at? Obviously, if you don't have the technical background, it may be a little more difficult to understand and utilize the tools in the way they're intended to be used. So I assume, like you said, you're kind of aiming them at more of the engineering and the technical side of the business.
I would say probably mostly on the project level. So they're
Okay.
usually project engineers, head of R&D or R&D people in different stages of the project.
Okay.
And then on the other side, people out of operations that actually know they have a pain to operate a case like that.
Right. Okay. That makes a lot of sense. And then one of the other things I've been thinking about as I've had these conversations is what the trade-offs are, and how do you kind of work to communicate what the trade-offs are to adopting more of a kind of low-code solution that's limiting or lowering the complexity to adopt these IoT solutions where they are doing more of the work versus kind of the other path, right? Which is more of the hands-on from the company where they're going to build it all for you. You don't have to do any of that piece. What are the trade-offs? What are the values for both sides, and kind of where do you see the market kind of going when it comes to both of those options?
So, from a historical perspective, I would say you see a lot of those use cases out of IoT that are very make, right? I mean, they come
Mm.
out, even if you look at those different technologies, they also come out of the maker space. So, they come out of a group of people who were very used to customize their things. So, they know how to code, they know how to set up all those kind of things. But they also have their own requirements or specific requirements, maybe even their personal requirements, how a solution should look like. If you start to go into a direction of no code, or you start to standardize stuff, your customization parts like that fall away, of course. So they have to get used to having less possibilities at certain points. So what we've done in the product is we still allow them to code in certain boxes. So they can, for example, do data parsing in a field, or they can code their own rules. Um, but they're not going back to that, hand knit stuff basically that they did before. And this is also the trade-off in the other direction. If you see maybe bigger enterprise or corporates that have a make decision, I would still say it's a make decision, or build that on their own services. We've seen quite some risks in maintainability there. So a company that actually decides to go for a make IT solution and potentially puts that load of work or that knowledge onto just a few people, they come back 2 years later or 3 years later because that person has left the company and they are just not able to maintain their own solution. So standardization will limit certain things, certainly, but it also gives you kind of the resilience to go into the future with that.
And are you all focusing, I know you mentioned the kind of smart building space, but are you all focused on individual industries and building the tools and the components to allow them to build solutions or applications more quickly, aimed at certain industries and use cases first before you can kind of expand into another one, if that makes sense? Or are you just giving them the raw tools across the board and they figure out how to put it together?
So we're an IoT horizontal IoT platform. That means you can use us basically in every vertical. What we do and what we also do very closely with our customers is that we call connectors. So this whole no code or low code approach also goes into a direction that we try to provide the connections into ERP systems on one side or into devices on the other side and standardize them for the client. So if one client integrates a device or something, the others should also be able to use that same case and build their case more quickly. That means you can, for example, very easily connect our system to Microsoft or AWS or SAP or whatever you want and send data there basically. It goes a bit in that direction. It's more of enablement than going into specific verticals or focusing on specific solutions.
Gotcha. Okay, I can follow that. Now let me ask you about. Let's look, 3-5 years down the road, and high level self service IoT. How realistic is it for us to be able to get to a point where any company can go to, be able to put an IoT solution together themselves quickly at affordable cost, from all the way from hardware to choosing the right connectivity, having it on the right platform, understanding the data to make sure they have it displayed in a user interface that their end users can use, that full scale thing. How realistic is it to get to a point where it's, we do have more self-service IoT and they're just building on top of a platform like yours across the industry as a whole? What do you think about that from a future standpoint?
I think we're still at a point where as I think I mentioned it before, where we're on a very heterogeneous market. So there's still a lot of different solutions, a lot of different connectivities, a lot of different architectural parts, but you already see that those things are kind of conglomerating together. Is that a word? I don't know. Like kind of they're starting to stick together and building up. Sure. And I see in 5 years it has to be. I don't know about the hardware part. I think that's probably also quite a difficult part, that you basically need to standardize hardwares. But we will certainly see that certain connectivities are going to continue and others not. There's always kind of a variant in there, but we definitely have to get to a point where the knowledge is already there as well. Right. So there's quite a lot of people, and you see that in other areas of digitalization, quite a lot of companies or people that don't have the knowledge yet of that market or of the possibilities that they have to standardize those things.
Yeah, I think there's education on both sides too, right? It's not just the platform companies and the IoT companies understanding the industries they're getting involved in to build specific applications or tooling to help them succeed. But it's also the other side is just understanding how to do this, or how a company can do this themselves. And when you're getting to the hardware point, which is what you were mentioning, that's an interesting piece to this whole puzzle as well. And I think there's a couple different paths I've heard people are exploring taking. One is the more devices you can integrate within a platform, so it's kind of like an off-the-shelf kind of grab for a company to be able to use. But at the same time, there are such unique use cases out there, and I don't know if that's ever really going to completely go away, to where there is needs for customized hardware, and I think that will still serve a purpose. But the integration of that hardware into a platform and the easier that can be, I think helps make everyone's life a lot easier.
Definitely. So what I see, or what I believe, or what I've also felt, first of all, in the last few years when we've worked on that thing, we've noticed that we need to do less evangelization. People know already what they talk about. And what I strongly feel, and I think this is why IoT is more an evolution than a revolution at the moment,
Sure.
is that people are aware of lock-in effects. So people are very aware of the potential implications of taking a decision in direction of an IoT platform or a solution, and of the lock-in effects those decisions have. So they think a lot of how they can use those components, and if they should do a lock-in with their product or not, and how they will maintain that whole process over the long term. So I think an IoT platform, or using different technologies in the architectural stack, allows them also to exchange components, for example. So you might be able to exchange your hardware, you might be able to exchange your IoT platform or your end application over the lifetime of your product.
And do you think I don't want to say consulting, but it's more of the consulting relationship side of IoT development. How do you think that's going to progress? Do you think that's going to go away and minimize, or do you think it's going to maybe just shift in what they are helping companies do from the point where a company realizes they need to kind of adopt IoT in some capacity?
I think it will probably shift towards a more business value, I would say.
Sure.
Probably away from a technological solution finding, making process, to a business value, or actually requirements that are more related to what you're actually going to do with your case than actually picking the components of that case. At the moment, I still have the feeling, especially with system integrators, that a lot of them, they love to sell hours, of course, that they would go on and about and search for components that they can actually build or even develop, because that's where they get the money from. And the future is more into kind of business consulting or solution consulting, I believe, than in technology here.
Yeah, and I think when you start tying that into these applications interacting with potential customers, generating new revenue streams and things like that, there is a very different approach to the conversation and the kind of people that are I guess, able to answer those questions and help strategize there, as opposed to more of the technical team that, as of now, is more involved in help putting the solution together, as opposed to the business side, which is what you're kind of alluding to now.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this: where we are now versus where we're going. We kind of talked about that a bit with the low code, no code type side of things. What are some of the biggest challenges that you see right now when it comes to adoption of low code across the industry? And then kind of to tie on to that, how do we overcome some of those challenges that you all have seen and probably worked on and worked through yourself?
I think that's quite a difficult question, or the challenges of low code itself are probably more in the direction of the awareness that those kind of technologies even exist. So the belief that I basically have to break my knee and build things on my own is still quite strong, especially in the I would call it the CIO corner, of those people who have been around somewhere in the 90s and fixing everything together on their own. So going with that low code thing, I don't think it's a big challenge. It's more the awareness of people to know, oh yeah, I can do that on my own. Why do I need to pay an external consulting firm a few $100,000 to build that for me?
And on the educational side, from your all's perspective, what is that a pretty big initiative to help not just educate on what low code kind of is, how it benefits, how it can be used, the value, and so forth, but also how to use the tool. So if somebody comes in, they are able to either directly ask you all questions, or there's documentation in place where they can easily get set up, started, all the way through scale, and just kind of how big of a focus is that for the low code kind of movement, if you will?
So documentation needs to be there. It's on the website, and it also has to be, of course, the whole customer journey within the product.
Okay.
But I think, and that's probably also the feeling, the personal feeling for me, people decide very quickly, if they want to continue with the learning journey or not in a product. Do they have an aha moment or not? They sign up for a 30-day trial, and they might be there for 10 minutes or something, and you basically have to educate them very quickly how that low code works. There is not an expectation, to read a lot of documentation to it, but it has to be kind of hands-on. So people have a strong expectation that they initially understand how that works, and that they have a very quick success. and if there is any error or something doesn't work, they fall out basically. So
Totally.
that's probably the biggest challenge out of what you've just asked, is probably to
Yep.
keep their awareness here and then also provide them with that quick success that they need.
Totally makes sense. Yeah, that quick success helps them kind of get approval and buy-in for more budget, for more initiatives, and just continue on down the path as opposed to being deterred and kind of pushed away. Um, one of the last questions I want to ask you before we wrap up here is around a lot of, obviously, what you're focused on building is reducing that complexity that we talked about at the beginning of the conversation. Outside of the platform piece, what other things, or I guess what other ways are there to help minimize IoT projects not getting off the ground? And what can companies be doing to kind of help that, to reduce complexity in other areas that maybe you all don't necessarily focus on, but you've seen from afar that there are challenges that are really kind of hindering maybe the adoption across the board of IoT that you think is worth noting?
So you might actually think that's funny, but one of the biggest issues I think is that it seems that not all engineering teams have credit cards yet,
Okay.
and that's not a
Okay.
joke. Um, One of the things that we made and that we were not expecting that it was actually that successful, or the feedback that we got was, you can buy connectivity in our product. Basically, we have connectivity in there. You can pay it by credit card, and it works. That's perfect. But there were certain clients who actually had to go to their boss's boss to ask for a credit card to buy a product and try something out. And I
Hmm.
mean, we're talking about trying something out for a few dollars a month, and not for a
Yep.
lot of money. But the whole buying center has changed a bit in the direction of
Interesting.
those people who are using a product like that. And it seems that the financial decision hasn't been given to them to decide what's best tool for them to use. So there is kind of a conservatism in the sense of who's the buying center or who's actually buying a product like that, or even worse, from the other side. And that's why I made the example of telecommunications before.
Right.
Imagine you have to call, and it goes back to the first thing that we said. Imagine you have to call your telecommunications provider for IoT connectivity. You can just reach him from 8 to 5 during the daytime and just 5 days
Hmm.
a week. And you're trying to build an IoT case Saturday night at 11 o'clock. And you actually need to sign a contract with them before you can use their connectivity, not in the sense
Right.
of buying it self-service in the product. Those are the kind of features, administrative hurdles that actually block those projects out that have
Sure.
nothing to do with technology at all.
Right. That makes a lot of sense, because I think the companies in the IoT space are working to help minimize the roadblocks to adoption. But if it's not being, if those, if the same kind of roadblocks that are happening on the company side or the adopter side are not being minimized, like engineering having the ability to spend money, use a credit card, that kind of thing, all across the board, it doesn't matter how much work you all do to make it easy. If they can't get approval, or they can't bring things to market or test things in the correct way, it's never going to really get out the door for them. Yeah, that all fantastic. So the last thing I wanted to ask you here, because we're still early in the year, what are you looking forward to in 2022? What are you all most excited about? What's any big things on the horizon coming out of your all's company that we should be on the lookout for? Just generally across the industry, anything that's really exciting from your all side of things?
So I see quite a few projects ripe for global rollout this year.
Okay,
We've also seen connectivities that do global rollout, like Helium, for example, at the moment, that is running
sure.
out with LoRaWAN all over the world. And I believe there's going to be quite some scaling, or at least some preparation for scaling this year, that I want to see, and that I'm very much looking forward to. That will also take that whole IoT topic out of that corner that it sometimes is. I guess 2022 we'll see quite some stuff there going on over different countries.
And when you're talking about scaling, are you talking more about which pieces of IoT do you think are going to be scaling? Is it more just solutions in general, or is it the connectivity side, or what?
I think it's going to be solutions. So I think this whole
Yeah.
kind of adoption by corporates that are going to scale solutions globally and into different entities, that's going to be the topic of that year.
Yeah. I think or I'm definitely in agreement there. I think COVID's been an interesting process for companies to go through, where initially projects were stalled, but then they started to come back to life. They realized how important these solutions were to their company from an efficiency standpoint, and now they're starting to get out there more. And I think as we start to see more successes and bigger successes, you're going to see adoption across the board increase, and companies looking for tools like yours to help get to market quickly at an affordable cost and enable better operations internally with business and just kind of do a lot of great stuff with IoT. So I'm very excited as well for the year and see what happens.
We're very much looking forward to that and to the end of Corona, of course.
Absolutely. So our audience out there listening wants to learn more, kind of explore your tools, explore your offerings, all that kind of stuff. What's the best way to reach out, best way to follow up or learn more?
You find us under Akenza.io on the website, and you can
Okay.
also try the product out there for 30 days free. And
Fantastic.
just come by, ask questions. We have an email and the contact form on the website.
Awesome. Well, Jonas, this has been a great conversation. Thanks so much for taking the time to talk about this. It's definitely a hot topic in IoT. You guys are doing some fantastic things, really helping lower the complexity for the industry to adopt, and that's one of the biggest things I think a company can really be doing to contribute. And we wish you all the best success, and thanks again for your time.
Thanks for taking the time, Ryan, and thanks that I was able to be here.
Absolutely. All right, everyone. Thanks again for watching that episode of the IoT For All podcast. If you enjoyed the episode, please click the thumbs up button, subscribe to our channel, and be sure to hit the bell notification so you get the latest episodes as soon as they become available. Other than that, thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time.